Hey listeners, I'm your host, Juan Collado Díaz, and this is Político. Hey all, and welcome once again to another episode of Político. I am your host, Juan Collado Díaz, and today with me I have Travis Misurell. He's the founder of Think and the creator of Digital Politics, a new framework that challenges everything we assume about power, representation, and democracy itself. We all know that the system is rich in some kind of way, because we live in the system every day, but we couldn't really put this into just words for an intro. So without further ado, welcome and thank you so much for joining me, Travis. Do you mind sharing a little bit about you, the work you do, share a little bit about Think, and what is digital politics in itself? And how you came with this idea to put it all together?
Sure. So my name's Travis Misurell. My background's in psychology and systems thinking. Pretty much all my life I've been fascinated about people's perspectives and how we all see different realities and experience the world differently. I'm also neurodiverse, meaning that I myself really experience the world differently, and it helped me see politics in a different way, kind of do a zoom out and kind of see it from different perspectives, kind of like what I do with a lot of different things. And so I would even say fundamentally that's one of the reasons I was able to come up with this solution. And so I found at Think when I realized, the problems with politics is really, it's more than just the system itself. It's really how we see the politics and the system. And the one thing that I feel no one's been able to do is really tackle the framing of politics rather than just either talking about just structuring it or just giving people facts and expecting things to change, rather than actually changing the framing and how we actually see politics. So really, myself and the organization, we're trying to help people rethink democracy from the ground up. What we call seeing in DP, digital politics, which is really a new lens of looking at politics. And kind of in a nutshell, which we'll go more into, is it just going from the biggest change is going from just left versus right politics to people versus power.
Yeah, and I notice a lot of that when I do with my podcast regularly, when I interview people. There's a lot of we're tired of the left versus right. I myself stopped being left versus right many years ago, and I've seen it with many of the people that I talk to every day. So one was when you were doing this, and what got you away from the left versus right perspective? What moved you away from that?
Well, ultimately, I see how it's just fundamentally broken of two sides just being directly against one another. I really got deeply, kind of all my life, I was interested in sociology and looking at the society as a whole. But around 2016, I really got deeper into politics specifically. But part of it just, just the black and whiteness of left versus right just doesn't make sense. Part of what we want to do is seeing in DP is really showing that, not all the time, but sometimes both sides have a legitimate concern in a certain situation, and the true solutions to these problems would actually be listening to both sides. And I stress it's only certain situations, but for example, environmental issues versus regulations. In short, we should be able to find ways to streamline regulations and do it where it's not crippling certain businesses, but at the same time protect the environment. And it's the left versus right makes it so simple that you either protect the environment or you cripple the system. They make it just such black and white. And the idea is we need to find a solution that kind of appeals to both sides in a lot of these policies. And so generally just, I feel like in general, the world's kind of moving away from just everything black and white. You're good, you're evil, and there's a lot of gray and humans are complex, basically.
Oh, absolutely. So, and you mentioned earlier one word that I'm not familiar 100% with, and you mentioned you will go in depth about it, is digital politics. Can you share a little bit of what it is and how it differs from traditional ways of thinking, like democratic or democracy itself?
Sure. So it's something that we're coining ourselves at Futures Now Coalition, or think. And so we're saying seeing in DP, digital politics. And at its core, one of the main things is, moving to realizing that the system right now is really more about people versus power. We're also kind of coining it as up-down politics. And the idea is that with today's system, there's just a lot of conflicts of interest on both sides. And what we want people to do when they, and as we call it as seeing in DP, is when they're voting, don't just vote left versus right, or don't even just vote just based on what you like about their policies, because it's really about their intentions. Like, we've kind of known all our lives that like politicians lie and they're going to just give lip service. They're going to say what they want to say. They're going to do whatever they want to do to get what they want, to get your votes. And what we want to help people understand and respond to is, really looking at their background and, don't just take them at face value that, unfortunately, the way the system is, there's a lot of money in politics and conflicts of interest. And so beyond it boils down to their intention. Like, what is the politician's intention and who do they truly represent? Do they really represent the American people, or do they have their big donors or corporations that they represent? And so that's a big part of what we're trying to overcome is like, there could be good and bad politicians on both sides. And, you really want to find somebody that truly will represent you and not just give you lip service.
Absolutely. And so with that, you did mention the up and down, moving from like left to right to up and down, or people versus power. And this shift is quite important because we have, and more in this current society where we are living in such a left versus right movement where you're either far left or far right, and everything's so radical. There's no more centric anymore. It doesn't exist. Your centric Democrats or your centric Republicans, they don't exist. You have now, you either left versus right, or you move to one of the other parties like Green Party, Libertarian, or like People's Party. You move to one of those. So why is this shift so important for our citizens today and for the people around?
Yeah, sure. So another layer of digital politics is the idea of that democracy is supposed to have choices. And so, right now, what most people are saying these days is they have to vote for the lesser of two evils. And like, you go to the general election, and by that point, you're pretty much just have two choices. And it's usually pretty much you have one left-leaning choice and one right-leaning choice. So with digital politics and in general, we're trying to look at the system as a system. Like part of this whole thing is zooming out and actually looking at democracy, putting the policy issues aside for a minute. Like, that needs to be addressed too, but it's really the system at its core is what's not working for the American people. And, so right now we're stuck in this two parties, and most first world democracies in this world have more than two parties. A lot of them have two more major parties, but virtually every other democracy has multiple parties involved in government. And so it's more reflective of the American people that instead of just two big extremes, there are the smaller parties, and then they end up building like a coalition government where multiple parties have to work together to push certain policies through based on who can agree with who. And it just lets it to be less black and white, more of that nuance in politics. And, ultimately democracy should have choices. And, most people are very unhappy by the time they get to the general election and they only have the two people that are viable. They're disappointed. And even like in this last election, they said about 63% of Americans want a viable third party option. So part of this is like we want to look at the system itself. And, as of right now, just because of the way the system is rigged, third parties and independents aren't very viable. But we want it to be clear to the American people. It's not that people don't want them to be viable. It's just that like certain changes would need to happen to make them viable. But we want to be very clear that people do want other choices. They do want independents to have a chance. They do want third parties. And so that's what makes a healthier democracy. And it's what the American people want. And so a lot of what our plans are to upgrade democracy is to give those choices. And even from us, we're kind of open-ended. If America decides independence is the right direction, that's fine. If they want to go third party, that's fine. Our biggest goal is just for more choices for America. And then most of it's really just building the right framework and infrastructure to give America the choice of how the system will evolve and what the direction of democracy will look like in the future.
So in your opinion, let me ask you, what do you think how has this current system failed the American people?
So one of the biggest problems in the system is really money and politics. With Fink, we talk about the three main evils in this world in terms of what's messing up with politics is one is corporate influence and the legalization of basically bribery, that you could give endless money as a corporation or just as a wealthy donor to these politicians. Two is the establishment media and how there's basically, they say there's 6 companies that run about 90% of the TV news media that exists today. And in general, it's just these large billion-dollar corporations are the majority of the news that people have gotten. So that's the second problem. And just their bias, and they have a lot of influence on the people. So they give us a false choice and falsely limit our choices of who is even an option to vote for. And then the third problem is party gatekeeping, and those in leadership, they don't want more choices for people because that's threatening to themselves. That once they're in office, they want to protect themselves in office. And ultimately, people talk about they want like term limits, they want to get money out of politics, things like that. And what we say is like a wolf is not going to put a lock on their own cage, and like we can't expect these leaders, these politicians, to put their own guardrails up, and so we need to come together under and kind of get on the same page of what we want for the future to look like. So that's another part of digital politics, is really looking at coming together on the system itself and talking about these kinds of issues and getting on the same page, regardless if we disagree about more partisan issues or specific policy level issues.
Absolutely. So now that question piggybacks to what I was going to ask you next, which is, in your own perspective, your views, why hasn't democracy reform worked yet? And what are we missing as a country to make that work?
Yeah, so there's a lot of great reform movements out there, and the solutions, they are great, but because they're all so divided, causes it to ultimately fail. And part of it is they have to look at it as realistically as possible. There's some great intentions on some of these reforms, but for example, there's certain movements that want to put a constitutional amendment to get money out of politics. And us at Fink, we absolutely endorse that. We want there to be a constitutional amendment. In the long run, that will be a solution that will need to happen. However, it's not realistic to say that it's going to happen anytime soon. It wasn't going to happen under a Biden administration. It's not going to happen under a Trump administration. So, a lot of these issues, we have to it's both about being realistic of what is and isn't possible at this stage. But then the other thing is that these different reforms, they don't work together, and sometimes they even work against one another. Now, recently, our organization's been talking to a lot of different movements and political organizations. They now are starting to try to work together. So that is a change, but there's a lot of challenges like egos to push past. But ultimately, what we're trying to do as a solution is phase one is really this digital politics and this new framing of how to work together. But then phase two is going to be a civic internet, or as we call it, digital democracy, which is going to be more of an operational infrastructure and an ecosystem for reform movements. And so the idea is to start unifying the reform movements and and bring them together under the common goals of like, they might disagree on specifics on policies and other kind of issues, but there's just fundamentally just talking about money out of politics, more choices for government, and just those just straight voting issues like that. Can bring us together, bring us into one unifying ecosystem, and being okay with that. We're not going to agree on everything, but fundamentally, pretty much any issue is going to boil back to money in politics and the system being rigged. Whether you want to improve healthcare, climate issues, virtually everything boils down to the money in politics, and the concentration of power is the core problem. And so we want to bring these reforms and political orgs and citizens and grassroots politicians, pretty much everyone that's not part of the status quo. We want to bring them together into a new ecosystem, both tech related, political, and psychological, to be able to overcome the obstacles. Because for example, one of the biggest obstacles, especially for grassroots candidates, and whether third party, independent, or even within the two parties, is that they don't get any media attention. And just, by nature, when you're not part of the status quo, you're going to have money against you. You're going to have the media, lack of media attention, and your own parties might be out to get you. So there's all these obstacles. But for example, overcoming the media issue, part of this ecosystem we want to build is connecting with independent media, other social media influencers and journalists. And basically, instead of having the establishment media, we want to build a network of independent media that can be part of this ecosystem. And once again, not everyone's going to agree with everyone, but having one kind of unifying infrastructure so that, if you're a grassroots politician and the mainstream media is not going to let you talk and say how you're a third party candidate, or you're not going to be part of a debate, well, we're going to help them get on independent media and we want independent media to be the voice that the establishment media will refuse to be. So ultimately, I'm trying to say is we're looking to bypass the establishment is one of our phrases. We want to bypass the establishment. Everything that the system has in the status quo, we want to kind of build a decentralized grassroots replacement of what they have to get, because grassroots candidates, they deserve a voice, but they don't get a voice the way the system works. So we want to have a new system that can give them that voice through decentralized means and independent media and more of a variety.
Absolutely. When I started this podcast, it was one of my goals. In this past election, I had the opportunity to interview two of the third-party candidates, the nominated Libertarian and nominated Unicorn Party individuals, and I got to interview them, and that was huge because none of the other medias were doing it. So I definitely agree with that. How the media, in a way, the media is the biggest oppressor of our democracy and our current system. I think that's huge to have decentralized and more independent media out there that is not, it's not run by Disney or run by one of these bigger corporations. Because we look at the umbrella, Disney owns half of it, and then they own a lot of it, and then you have this other little companies that are trying to get out of it. And right now, one of the most independents right now is NPR and PBS, and they're most likely to get defunded by the current administration. So slowly independent media is just losing, and that's where something digital politics come in, when we can bring people, as you were mentioning, that's where we can bring the people out and learn more and see. So with that, let me ask you, how does seeing in digital politics change the way that someone engages with their politics in everyday life?
Yeah, so really it's when we want people to really see when you're talking, when you get news from the media, pay attention to where's that source. So like you just said, Disney owns so much of things, even in the last couple of years, it's been billionaires were told as a suggestion to buy out different media as almost like a hobby to buy out media so you could sway it in your favor. But so the seeing in DP is really understanding the intention of the information you're getting, the intention of the politician you're going to be voting for. So, when you're deciding to vote for somebody, again, like, yeah, you want to match how they align ideologically. If there's certain policies you care about, of course, you're going to want to find somebody that aligns with what you care about. But for example, if one of your main issues is about healthcare, don't vote for somebody that gets millions of dollars from the private health insurance industry or big pharma. And that's part of what we're going to start building these checklists and basically like workshops of how to identify the conflicts of interest of a candidate. And some of it is directly who funds their campaigns. Some of it is their stock market investments. They make, a lot of people in Congress, they become multi-millionaires as soon as they get into Congress because it's basically insider trading. And then there's also the power of the media. And so ultimately, like one of the things that seeing in DP helps people realize is people think that corruption is like this old fashioned, like a truck of cash comes back behind closed doors and gives it to somebody. But no, today bribery is all through the bureaucracy. It's all legal. It goes through the system. And, the one benefit, it's starting to get less and less transparent, but it's pretty easy. If you dig deep enough, you can find out what conflicts of interest a candidate has. So, for example, opensecrets.org, you could go to, and pretty much every federal candidate, you could type in their name, and it'll show you what industries funds them. Eventually, we're going to incorporate that into that future civic internet that I mentioned. But there's going to be there are different ways to see that. Even like Unusual Whales is a site that tells you certain stock market investments for certain politicians. So we want to help people understand how to find find out if a candidate truly works for them or they work for bigger donors or corporations, and then tying it back to the media, we want people to understand that they shouldn't be using the establishment media. That there is this inherent bias that if they're one of those handful of multi-billion-dollar corporations, they're going to be biased, and like you might like them because they might have the left and right leaning bias that somebody identifies with, but it goes back to that up and down politics. And podcasters like you, as well as like independent media on YouTube, there's so many new ways to get news. And, us as Think, we're not even telling people like specifically which ones to follow. We're not even here to say like, there's going to be left leaning ones, right leaning ones, libertarian ones, and that's fine. But we want to persuade people to find other media, more decentralized media, more independent media, where journalism is still has integrity and they're really trying to give the facts. Ultimately, we all have our biases. The goal is just to be as little biased as possible. But, the establishment media, they have to be biased because they're answering to their advertisers and those that are giving them the money. So they're always going to be not nearly as accurate. So, like you said, that you've had third party candidates come on board, like, there's going to be more truth when you talk to more independent media, whether it be the podcast, YouTube. There's a lot of different ways to get it. America has to be careful on the source, but that's kind of what seeing DP is going to be, is how to help people find out the conflicts, find out, can I trust this source, whether it's a politician or media, or an organization like a nonprofit. A lot of nonprofits, they're not as good as they say they are, and people sometimes assume that just because you're a nonprofit, you're going to be good. But unfortunately, that's not even true. You have to do more digging than that. So it's really helping people open their eyes, kind of do this zooming out, look objectively on what is the goal of this source that I'm trying to tap into, and do they have my interest in mind, or do they have someone else's interest in mind?
Absolutely. And what you're mentioning is a way that we could adopt because it doesn't seem hard to bring. It doesn't seem hard to bring. And I always tell people change takes time. It can even take millennia. We don't know. Change can take its time. But how is a way that we as citizens, and here in the U.S. can adopt this new political worldview, where we can work with digital politics and bring a knowledge of this divisive left and right where people understand more. But how can we start this, and what is the first thing we can do to start this change?
Sure. So right now, we're going to keep everyone up to date right on our website, futureis.org, as well as on our social media. That's a big thing that we're engaging people through our socials. We're mostly active on TikTok, Blue Sky, Instagram, but on a couple other ones. Discord is currently our first official online community with the people. So we just opened it up about a month ago. But that's a starting point where we're asking America about this mission, and we're really setting up the roadmap for everything. I literally have decades of plans for how this unfolds, but we're still in the earlier stages, articulating it, putting it out so people can easily digest and understand what we're doing, as well as building the interface to do the communication. So for right at this stage right now, we're using Discord, but this is all phase one, is just spreading the awareness of what this new mission is. We're calling it a meta movement. It's a movement of movements. It's not just a regular movement. We really want to interconnect other movements. We're not saying that we're the answer, but we want to connect everyone that has potential answers, build infrastructure so we could collaborate better. And again, we're not going to all agree on everything, but we want to build infrastructure that helps you find who does agree with you on different things, and then map out how to make this bigger change. So there's a lot happening on our website. We're working on this digital politics app is coming out within the next month or two, which is going to help people ask the right questions for themselves. It's going to give them resources on how to find out the funding backgrounds of politicians and situations like that. But then ultimately phase two, which hopefully is going to be depending on how quickly we could get this growing exponentially, is hopefully by the midterms we'll have the digital democracy, the civic internet that we're looking to build, and that's where everything really starts escalating, because that's going to be a system that showcases all politicians equally. It's going to be a home for independent media. It's going to hold grassroots movements and political orgs. Basically, the ecosystem that I'm talking about, that's basically going to be the digital embodiment of the ecosystem, and really the digital embodiment of America's democracy. So it's basically, in a nutshell, we're trying to build an alternative political system, and starting with DP as the lens, and then DD, digital democracy, as the place to act, the tech place to act and interface, and then basically use that to coordinate with each other, start planning out, start unifying who to vote for, and give voices to good candidates. Again, we're not even going to say vote left or right, but we'll point out the good guy on the left and the good guy on the right, and show you if there's a good third party there and independent. So when digital democracy opens up, it's going to really showcase and level the playing field for third parties and independents, and just kind of force transparency, so you can easily have a one-stop shop to see who does truly represent you. And so basically it's really upgrading democracy from the outside in and from the bottom up, because it's you can't expect those in power to do any of this. So we need to do it from the outside, change people's voting habits. See, that's a key as well, is if we directly do a beeline to the citizens, connect the citizens directly to their politicians, connect citizens directly to independent media, even different civic technologies and different movements that have people's best interests in mind. Digital democracy is going to connect them all together so you don't need to raise millions of dollars to be heard, and and have that massive media attention, things like that, because it'll be a one-stop shop where everyone goes. But so ultimately, that will change people's voting habits, and we could change the entire system. People ask me all the time, there's billions of dollars against you, there's all this power against you, how can you take that on? And it's like, we're not going to take it on directly. We're going to bypass that, all that noise, all that monstrosity, bypass it, get directly to the citizens, connect them into this new interface that's going to be owned by the people for the people. It's literally going to be citizen owned. Fink's not going to own it. We're going to help you build it, and we're going to build it with America, but we're not going to own it. It's going to be everyone's going to have an equal ownership in it, and ultimately just changing the people's voting habits. So we can't expect certain policies to pass right now, but if we change who's elected, it'll change everything from the bottom up. So it really starts with voting, getting better candidates in office. We can't expect the people already in office to do this. And I want to emphasize, both sides are that problem, but neither side is going to fix these issues that as they stand in office right now. So this is basically to organize people, help them. Still, again, they could even disagree. People in this new meta movement can disagree on their ideologies, but it's basically, if you vote down instead of up, and it does, and you could stick to, if you want to go third party, go third party. If you're good with if you want to stay in the two parties, that's okay too. We'll help you. We want you to spend more time on the primaries if you're going to vote two party, but we're not going to push people on what ideology they should follow, but we want them on down politics, grassroots people, decentralized candidates, people that are not going to take corporate money, super PAC money, and people that truly, genuinely want to help fix democracy. So we're going to help give the guidelines on how to identify the right candidates for themselves. And last thing on that is that, a big part is it's more of the mindset shift. We don't even need to educate people per se. Like, some of this is about education, but the deeper thing is helping people understand how the system works, how it's rigged today, and then give them the ability to think for themselves critically on making better choices for candidates. And I'm not going to just go to the general election and vote D down the line or R down the line, but I'm going to go to the primaries, and I'm going to identify who's going to be on my side and not on the corporation side, and that's just going to pretty much change everything.
Absolutely. I think what you were saying, one of my favorite quotes from a third party is Chase Oliver. He was running for president this last election under the Libertarian ballot. And he always says it's no longer about left versus right. It's right versus wrong. And I thought that was it resonated with me, because I've seen it for so many years, how we look at left and right, but we forget that both parties are doing wrong. And, and we have this less votes for the list of two evils, but there's always no evil. There is a person who's not evil. Why vote for evil when you can vote for someone who's better? And I think that's where something like this comes in and builds that platform for those that they may not know that there's something that out there that is not the evil. With this, you mentioned a little bit of the civic internet and the future plan called the digital democracy. Can you tell me a little bit more about that, your vision for it, and how does this fits into this bigger picture and mission?
Sure. And yeah, you just nailed it, what you were saying about right versus wrong. And there are, we've been talking to a lot of people, and they're like, oh, well, all candidates are corrupt. And it's like, no, it's not that. It's those they tend to be in power because the system is rigged in their favor. But there's millions and millions of really great candidates out there. They just don't get the chance to have that voice. But yeah, so to go into digital democracy, DD, it's going to be a civic internet, again, truly owned by the people for the people. Essentially, every American will have the ability to opt into an equal ownership stake of this technology. And there's going to be a handful of built-in features like politician report cards that'll showcase all politicians. It'll show them all politicians equally. It'll show you their conflicts of interest, who's funding their campaign, what industry is that money coming from. It'll pull as much information on stock market stock market interests that they have, things like that. We're going to build algorithms to track their promises and how often do they break their promises. So the report card is going to be like a majorly transparent way to look at different candidates. And then the other part, another big section of it is going to be a home for independent media, where different independent media journalists, influencers can come and post their content here. And unlike a lot of the current platforms of today, independent media gets attacked. Like YouTube demonetizes people when they're quote unquote too radical. And Meta does this thing now where you don't show up in feeds if you're too political. So there's a lot of things pushing against, like basically softening the voices of independent media. So DD is going to be a home for those people, as well as pretty much everyone we're talking about, everyone that's part of the grassroots and wants to move into another system that's truly representative of the people. It's going to be a home for them. And so there'll be key features that are going to be built in, but then it's also going to be a decentralized set of tech apps. Because there's, like we're talking about reforms, there's a lot of civic technology out there that a lot of movements have created, like ones that help politicians start their campaign. There's apps that help you can like vote on different policy issues. There's like a lot of different civic apps that have so much potential, but just by the nature of things being grassroots and decentralized, they don't have the money for the marketing, and so virtually almost no one knows they exist. And so there's these wonderful technologies that exist that people don't know, and so part of digital democracy is going to be basically a centralized interface for decentralized technology. And so America will be able to go to digital democracy, but then see other people's apps, see all these different, anything politically related. So it's politicians, independent media, but then also civic technologies. So it's going to be basically, it's again, for the people, by the people, but just having one centralized place, again, like the digital embodiment of America's democracy, where you go for everything political, and then everything can spring out of that, whether there's, individual technologies that aren't directly related to DD, but they're going to be plugged into DD, as well as those other organizations and politicians and parties will be on there. So so that's the ultimate goal for digital democracy. It is, again, phase 2 is for that. We really need, we want to build it with America. We're not building it just for them. It's going to be with America. We need to get further into the awareness stage of people knowing what we're doing, help support us. And, there's going to be a lot of surveying and focus groups and polling to ask America what they want, help them, help figure out what features would work that would empower America to understand who they should vote for and help them connect to the right media sources. So it's going to be very, very open, and it's going to be a project built with America, with different movements will come together, helping come up with different ideas and plugging it in. We've been talking to a lot of movements lately about inter-movement communication system. So that would also be in this. So it'd be a way for movements that want to work together. There'll be a lot of tools built into this to help them work together with one another. So this will be a myriad of different features that are going to be coming out over time. And again, it's not going to be us. We're just kind of launching it to be rooted into America. And then America is going to just keep building on it from then on, just like we maintain all democracy as a system. So there's a lot to that. I know it's right now we try to focus more on digital politics and the mindset frame, because really that has to come first. People understand what is the purpose of the technology, what's the problem going on with the rigged system and the concentration of power. So we really want people to understand that and what we mean by that, and the mindset shift. And then phase 2 will be building the technology that empowers everyone and then goes with this new shift of democracy and building a better future for all of us.
Absolutely. And for those at home who resonate with this and actually like this idea and they want to begin something bigger or be part of it, how can they get involved and how can they get started with this?
Sure. Yeah. So going to our website, futureis.org, it always has the latest information. As we're recording this podcast right now, we're updating our website, but by the time people hear it, it should be updated. And so we're always giving the latest information. The first thing that comes out within the next about 2 months is the Digital Politics app, and so that's going to have a big consensus survey. We're already starting to launch our survey system to ask America, what are your deepest frustrations? What are your concerns? How do you envision a better future? And really just start asking questions, get their feedback as we build out both digital politics and DD. We want America to give feedback along the lines. So going to our website and just following what we're doing, things are evolving quickly. We're still at the very early stages of what we're doing right now, but it's gonna grow exponentially. We're working towards what we call our breakout moment, where this really starts going viral and significant numbers of people really hear what we're doing, how unique it is that what we're doing, and really help start coming together and start building this out exponentially. So, visiting our website, futureis.org, and then there's all our socials there. Discord is our online community. At this stage, once digital democracy is built, that's where that's going to be the official online community. But for now, it's on Discord to engage America at this stage, and then a lot's going to just branch out from there. So just, going to our website, in short, is the best way to see the most up-to-date information on this. There'll be a way to get on the apps, answer the survey questions. And then we have a lot of initiatives every month. Right now, we're actually launching our first major fundraising campaign. By the time this podcast airs, it'll be kind of midway through it. But so we're really in that earlier stages. We want, we're all about the grassroots, $5, $10 at a time, but from a lot of people. So we don't take money, we're not going to take money from corporations and things like that. So it does bring a little bit of a challenge in the starting stages. But it'll quickly grow exponentially. And so we're starting with that and just following along, learning what we're about. We're still even trying to articulate it the best way. We have like so many different questions, so many different details to this, so many variables. This is a multi-dimensional plan that literally has decades of plans that'll unfold step by step. And right now, the hardest challenge is really just saying as much as we can, as concise as we can, and as clear and concise as possible. It has been the biggest challenge. So we're getting the language down so people can understand it in short periods. But at this stage, it's just learning more about what it means to see in DP. A lot of videos are starting to come out now on our end to explain that and, show people in an engaging way, as well as educating on what the problems are in the system, how the system is rigged, how that works, and how to identify that the system is rigged, with specific politicians and media. And so ultimately, that would be the best, is engaging on our website, engaging on our social medias, and especially Discord, and then seeing what we have from there.
Absolutely. And so for those that are listening from home, you are always welcome to check the show notes for this episode, which are listed in the description of the episodes as always. And you find all the links, including the Future Is Now Coalition's website, which is, again, if I'm correct, and correct me there if I'm wrong, is futureis.org. And you can also find them everywhere online as futureis.org on Blue Sky. Then you have the Discord server, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and I don't know if there's any others that will also be listed on the website as always. Travis, thank you so much for joining me today. Is there anything you want to add before we wrap it up?
No, that's it. Just, we could use any help on sharing social media, get that message out there. Everyone that's listening and is excited about this, we're, again, very on the early stages, but just get that word out there. People are resonating with this mission, and it's going to grow exponentially.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for listening. If you are enjoying Político, make sure to listen and follow on all podcasting platforms. If you are interested in learning more about the topic that we spoke today, follow the show notes at www.politicopod.com. Político is an Inquisitor Media original production hosted by me, Juan Collado Díaz. If you want to learn more about the work we do on our advocacy work, make sure to follow or visit Político at www.politicopod.com.